Somewhere inside you, there's a memory you were never allowed to use. It's the memory of waking up with nowhere to be. No alarm screaming in the dark, no inbox, no Sunday night dread already tightening in your chest before the week has even begun. For 300,000 years, that wasn't a fantasy. That was just an ordinary morning. And then, about 10,000 years ago, human beings made one single decision that erased it, and quietly handed you the exact life you're living right now. A life your ancestors, if they could somehow see it, might look at with something close to pity. Over the next 10 minutes, 3 things are going to shift for you. You'll understand what they actually had. You'll understand what we traded it away for. And right at the end, you'll hear the strange, almost unbelievable reason we may have given up paradise. A reason that has nothing to do with survival. Nothing at all. But let's start with the part that sounds made up, even though every word of it is true. Take everything you think you know about cavemen and set it on fire. The grunting, the endless struggle, the short, miserable, terrified life. Almost none of it survives contact with the evidence. Here's the scale, and it's almost impossible to actually feel. Our species is roughly 300,000 years old. Farming, the thing that built cities, kings, money, and jobs, is barely 10,000. So shrink all of human history down into a single day. The alarm clock, the boss, the mortgage, the word career, none of it appears until about 11:30 at night. Everything you were raised to call normal is crammed into the final 20 minutes before midnight, which means the real, default, factory-setting human being was never the office worker. It was the forager. We are the strange ones. We are the experiment. And the experiment is very, very new. So how hard was it, really, just to stay alive back then? In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Richard Lee got tired of everyone guessing and decided to actually count. He lived with a group still surviving close to that ancient way, and he measured exactly how many hours they spent getting food. The answer landed at about 15 to 20 hours a week. Not a day. A week. And it wasn't a fluke or one lucky tribe. Wherever anthropologists looked, the savannas of Tanzania, the forests of Paraguay, the Australian desert, completely different people, completely different worlds. The same answer kept coming back. 2, maybe 3 days of work. And the rest of the week belonged to them. Now I'm going to be honest with you, because I'm not here to sell you a fairy tale. Add in cooking, making tools, and raising children, and the real total climbs closer to 40 hours. So no, it wasn't a permanent vacation. But it was nothing. Nothing. Like the dawn-to-dark grind we were all promised. And you don't have to take my word for any of it. Their skeletons testify. Line up the bones of these hunter-gatherers next to the bones of the very first farmers who came after them, and it isn't even close. The foragers stand taller. Stronger teeth. Healthier joints. The farmers are shrunken, their mouths full of cavities, their spines worn down by repetitive labor, dying younger than the primitive people they supposedly improved upon. The bones are a signed confession. Life got harder after we advanced. Not before. But here's what really shatters the cartoon. If every waking second was a desperate fight to survive, then somebody needs to explain the art. Deep inside a cave in France called Chauvet, there are horses and lions painted on the walls around 36,000 years ago. Not scratches, not crude stick figures. Shading. Perspective. Animals caught mid-gallop, so alive they almost move in the torchlight. The work is so sophisticated that when scientists finally confirmed its age, they had to rewrite the entire timeline of when the human imagination switched on. Picture it. Someone crawled into total darkness, by firelight, into a cave they didn't even live in, for no reason except to make something beautiful. In South Africa, in a place called Blombos Cave, archaeologists found tiny shell beads about 75,000 years old, each one deliberately pierced, each one worn smooth from hanging on a string. That's jewelry. 75,000 years ago, someone wanted to look good. And in a cave in Germany, there's a flute, carved from the wing bone of a vulture 40,000 years ago, with 5 finger holes spaced with real, deliberate precision. Someone in the middle of an ice age sat down and made music for exactly the same reason you catch yourself humming without noticing you're doing it. Do you feel how that quietly rearranges everything? These weren't half-animals barely clinging to existence. They were people with taste, with longing, with an inner world as rich as yours, and far, far more time to actually live inside it. So let me put you there. Just for a moment. You wake at first light. Last night's fire is still glowing under the ash, and someone leans over and feeds it a branch. You eat what's left from yesterday, slowly, next to people you have known your entire life. There is no rush in any of it, because there is nowhere you need to be. Maybe a small group decides to head out and hunt. Maybe not. If there's food stored from before, you might not leave camp at all. So you mend a net. You shape a spear carefully, taking your time. Not because anyone is standing over you, but because being good at things earns you the one currency that matters here: respect. And by early afternoon, the so-called productive part of the day is basically finished, which brings us to the thing modern people genuinely cannot handle. You do nothing, and you feel absolutely no guilt about it. You sit in the shade, you talk, you laugh at old jokes, you nap, you pick through a friend's hair while they tell you something that happened 3 summers ago. And all of that wasted time was actually the most important work of the entire day. Because in a world with no bank, no police, and no written contracts, your relationships were the only safety net you would ever have. If people loved you, you ate when the hunt failed. If they didn't, you starved. Being liked wasn't a nicety. It was life or death. And then the sun goes down, and something close to magic happens. An anthropologist once recorded thousands of these conversations and found a pattern that stops you cold. In daylight, only about 6% of what people talked about was stories. The rest was practical. Who saw tracks and where, who wasn't pulling their weight. But at night, around the fire, 81% of it transformed into stories. Myths. The dead. Ancestors who did impossible things. Strangers living 100 miles away that no one in the circle had ever met. That firelit hour is where being human went deep. It's where gods were born, where the past, the future, and the invisible first took shape as words in the dark. Human culture didn't come from the daylight hustle at all. It came from the flames after the work was done. And here's a detail that should sting just a little. You'd assume they slept better than us. Long, deep, blissful, uninterrupted nights. They didn't. When researchers actually measured it, these groups sleep about 6.5 hours. The same as you. Sometimes less. But their languages don't even have a word for insomnia. Sit with that for a second. They slept less than you'd ever guess. And they slept just fine. Meanwhile, you have a soft bed and 8 free hours, and you're lying there at 3 in the morning, doing math about your entire life. So, what happened? What finally ended 300,000 years of this? About 10,000 years ago in the Middle East, human beings pushed seeds into the ground. It felt like the single smartest thing we had ever done. It was a cage with a beautiful disguise. The scientist Jared Diamond called farming the worst mistake in the history of the human race. And here's why. Farming is a one-way door. Grow more food, and you can feed more people. More people means you need even more food, so you farm even harder. Within a few generations, there were simply too many mouths to ever go back. The door swung shut behind us, and it never opened again. More work. worse food, shorter lives. But also, for the first time, surplus. Food you could store, and therefore food you could own. And the instant things could be owned, one person owned more than another. That is where the whole modern world begins. Rank, rulers, soldiers, taxes, and finally the strangest invention of all, the idea that your hours, your one and only life, could belong to somebody else, a job. I won't lie to you and paint the old world as Eden. Children died young. The wild had teeth. But understand exactly what we gave up. We didn't trade paradise for pain. We traded freedom for numbers. And now, here's where this whole story turns in a direction almost nobody sees coming, because we've been assuming this entire time that humanity surrendered all of that freedom for food, to eat, to survive. It's the obvious answer. It's what everyone believes. The evidence says maybe not. In southeastern Turkey, there's a place called Göbekli Tepe, enormous carved stone pillars, some of them as heavy as 10 cars, standing in great rings covered in foxes, lions, and vultures. It's a temple, the oldest temple ever found on Earth, roughly 11,500 years old, older than writing, older than the wheel, older than farming itself. And it was built by hunter-gatherers. People with no metal, no pottery, no fields. And yet somehow, with none of that, they quarried, dragged, and raised 10-ton stones into the sky. Not to live in, but to gather in, to worship in. Now, think about what a project like that actually requires. Hundreds of people coming together in one place for weeks at a time. And every single one of those people has to eat. You cannot feed a crowd that size on scattered wild plants. Not for long. So the leading theory, first argued by the very archaeologist who uncovered the site, flips the entire story of civilization completely upside down. We didn't build temples because we became farmers. We may have become farmers because we built temples. The gathering came first. The gods came first. And to keep feeding the faithful who traveled in to build and to pray, people began planting grain around that sacred hill, and stumbled almost by accident straight into the trap that would go on to swallow the next 10,000 years of human life. Read that one more time, slowly. The thing that may have cost us our freedom wasn't hunger. It was the need to gather, to belong, to reach for something bigger than ourselves. We didn't lose paradise to fill our stomachs. We may have lost it to feed our souls. And that leaves you standing in front of the strangest question of all. Because here's the part we almost never dare to say out loud. Those ancient people would not envy you. Not your house, not your money, not your endless glowing screens. And they wouldn't even understand your envy of them, because they had a feeling, a whole way of being, that we have very nearly lost completely. Enough. A full belly, a warm fire, the people you love close by, the day still open in front of you, and underneath it all, a quiet, unshakable certainty that this, right here, right now, is complete, that there is nothing left to prove, and nowhere else you're supposed to be. You will probably earn more, own more, and achieve more than almost any human who has ever lived. And you may go your entire life without feeling that. Not even once. So tomorrow morning, before the alarm winds, try asking the only question they ever really needed to ask themselves each day. What do I want to do today? And then notice. Really notice how long it has been since the answer to that question was truly, completely yours. Maybe we didn't just delete their way of life. Maybe we deleted the version of ourselves that still remembered how to be free.